Shot through the heart. One of the true tragedies of the Bosnian War was friend often fought friend. After the war broke out, people who knew each other all their lives now found themselves committed to killing each other. This was the case of two longtime friends, Slavko Slimek and Vladko Sarzinski, who, before the war, competed on the same Yugoslav national marksmanship team. With Sarajevo at war, Slavko, a Serb, was called up to fight in the new Bosnian Serb army. Vlado, a Croat with a Muslim wife, chose to stay and defend Sarajevo. The war, like a giant bloody axe, effectively cleaved their relationship in half now that a Serb was expected to kill a Croat or Muslim, and a Croat or Muslim was expected to return the favor. Slavko's expertise as a long-distance rifle marksman inevitably led him to become a sniper for the Bosnian Serb army, where his extreme skill enabled him to train other Serbian snipers to become better shooters. For the Serbs and their sniper campaign, Slavko was a gift from heaven because he enabled the Serbs to spread their terror more accurately and from longer ranges. However, Slavko did not just train other snipers to spread terror. He personally participated in the slaughter, skillfully picking off unsuspecting men, women, and children with a single headshot at extreme distances from his customized target rifle. On the opposite side of the battlefield, among the partially destroyed buildings and pockmarked streets, Vlado also served as a sniper. While sharing the same vocation as Slavko, Vlado's job was to stop the killing of Sarajevans by taking out the Serbs' own sniper teams. Vlado and the anti-sniper teams he trained proved successful, taking out 20 Serb snipers in the first 3 months of the war alone. Ironically, both men, due to their shooting skills and the importance of sniping in the Sarajevo's urban setting, ended up training and leading competing sniper teams. Eventually, Vlado's and Slavko's paths crossed. The collision course began in July 1992, when a particularly skilled Serbian sniper began working Vlado's neighborhood. Vlado described the new presence. This one was different from the others. He shot from extremely far away, an expert shooter. Must be 400 or 500 meter, and from the distance he never missed, always hitting his target in the head. Consistent, always in head. Vlado spent the following days studying his new threat, talking to people and observing the urban terrain as he conducted an investigation in order to glean anything he might betray the enemy sniper. Finally, after a thorough detective effort, Vlado spoke to a medic who extracted a bullet from one of the victims. It was a 7.92 millimeter bullet, what is often referred to as a German 8 millimeter round. Then, a week after talking to the medic, the deadly Serb sniper took another shot, and Vlado heard an unmistakable sound, that of a 7.92 millimeter rifle. Vlado recognized the sound of the 7.92 millimeter rifle as a Mauser K98. He knew the sound because he shot the Mauser K98 for years on the national rifle team with Slavko. The distinct sound of the Mauser was much different from the sounds of the 7.62 millimeter M76 sniper rifle most of the Serb snipers used. In fact, no one used a 7.92 millimeter rifle anymore. The 7.92 millimeter rifle was used by the Germans during World War II, but since was replaced by the standard 7.62 millimeter NATO round. Vlado calculated at the start of the war there were 16 Mauser 98s in Sarajevo, and he could account for 14 of them. One of the missing 2 rifles belonged to Slavko. In late July, the Serb sniper made a mistake. He was seen by one of Vlado's snipers as he entered a building only 200 meters away from the front lines. Vlado then moved into an opposing position, so he had a good view of the sniper when he exited his hide. Hours later, Vlado heard the distinctive report of the Mauser K98 and then saw a sniper running from the building. Vlado took aim, fired, and knocked the running sniper to the ground. Weeks later, Vlado talked to a former prisoner who was exchanged for other Serb prisoners. The ex-prisoner told Vlado what he already suspected, but did not want to hear. The sniper he shot was his best friend Slavko. Freelance journalist John Falk while he worked in Sarajevo, had a chance to talk to a Serbian defector named Slobo, who was stationed in the front lines across from Vlado's sniper position. Slobo told Falk, "Everyone out there knows Vlado. The Chetniks call him the Ustash, and he is the devil to them. Anyone here long enough fears the Ustash. The new guys come on the line, but they don't know. I would try to tell them, be careful, the Ustash is out there. This man will kill you if you are not careful. Young guys, stupid, don't believe it." The Serbs called Vlado the Ustash because they knew Vlado was Croatian. During World War II, the fascist Croatian government, called the Ustash, collaborated with Hitler's Germany and practiced their own bloody ethnic cleansing campaign against the Serbs. Falk, who spent many hours with Vlado on sniper duty, noted Vlado was such a good urban sniper because he was a good observer. Vlado spent most of his time doing nothing more than watching and recording the urban terrain on the Serbian side. Vlado valued observation so much he organized teams of spotters who did nothing but watch the Serb lines. These observers recorded everything in their notebooks. Everything. They watched the Serbian people. They watched windows. They watched bunkers. They watched holes in the walls of buildings. They looked for the smallest detail that might reveal an enemy sniper's position. Then they wrote it down so all the other snipers could relay and study the history of the neighborhood they were stalking. It was this steady, methodical approach that enabled Vlado to outduel Slavko, to shoot scores of Serbian snipers and soldiers, and to make it through 4 years of war alive. Guerrilla sniper operations. While the initial stages of the war demanded any person with better than average shooting skills become a sniper, the defending Bosniak forces eventually developed a more sophisticated, deliberate sniper effort. This advanced sniping was developed covertly in a Bosnian paramilitary unit called Seve. Seve means lark, which answers only to the senior Bosniak political leadership, to include the head of the Bosniak government itself, Alija Izetbegovic. One of the specially trained snipers from the Seva, Nedzad Harenada, when being interrogated by the Bosniak intelligence service, described some of their training. Harenda and other snipers who worked with him, to include foreign fighters, attended sniper instruction at various camps located in territory still under Bosnian government control. After receiving training in the fundamentals of marksmanship, the Seva snipers honed their skills by sniping at civilians living in the Serb-occupied suburb of Grbavica. Harenada and the other snipers found any civilian to be a suitable target, like old women. When shooting old women, they made sure the victims were wearing all black, which was a common practice by elderly Christian women. The Seva shooters wanted to make sure they gunned down Christian, not Muslim women. Besides terrorizing the civilian populace through illegal killings, Seva was assigned even more politically sensitive operations, like the shooting of UN peacekeepers. In one particular incident, the Seva allegedly shot and killed a French soldier in downtown Sarajevo, so it looked like the Serbs did the sniping. But after a battlefield investigation, the UN determined the bullet could not have been fired from the Serb-held territory in Grbavica, as first claimed. Even though investigators determined the French peacekeeper was not fired on from Serbian lines, they could not prove who actually pulled the trigger. After this botched attempt to incriminate the Serbs in order to bring increased UN political and military pressure against the Serbs, the Bosnian government used their political leverage to protect the Seva and prevent any further investigation into the matter. This was relatively easy to do because of the lack of forensic evidence and because the general public already knew Serb snipers targeted UN forces in the past. As a result of the Serbs' dismal sniping track record, which made it possible to frame them in the first place, it was hard for any investigation to build momentum. Sarajevo's counter-sniper response. Dedicated anti-sniper teams, like the ones trained by Vlado, were just one way the Bosnians tried to lessen the effects of the Serbs' own sniper campaign. But clearly, this was not enough to ensure the safety of Sarajevo's population. Just as the Bosnian snipers learned through trial and error, the hundreds of thousands of Sarajevans who suffered under the long sniping campaign in history became well versed in counter-sniper methodology through experience. It did not take long before everyone, from little children to old women, knew what it took to avoid getting hit by a Serbian sniper. Soon warning signs emblazoned with "Pazil Sniper" sprung up across the city, cautioning people about particularly dangerous areas. Eventually, every technique known to man was used to stay alive, including new ones the world never saw before. One of the easiest things to do to stay alive was not to give the Serbian snipers an easy target. People who lived in buildings located in the line of fire walked off the side of their buildings facing the enemy. Windows were boarded up, bricked up, or covered with blankets. Doors were nailed shut. People then altered their movement to and from their buildings, so they always left through the back to avoid the more dangerous exposed ones. If the distance from one building to another was reasonable, the neighborhood got together and dug trenches between them so they could travel back and forth out of sight of wary Serbian snipers. Traveling in the open on the streets and sidewalks always involved an element of danger. Consequently, Sarajevans driving in cars sped down exposed routes like madmen, with tires squealing and brakes screeching, as they dodged potholes made by incoming mortar rounds to make themselves a harder target. Pedestrians, old men, teenagers, little children, or anyone else who wanted to live sprinted from cover to cover. If they were in the open for long periods of time, they ran zigzag patterns to throw off Serbian marksmen. Although it had nothing to do with fitness, Sarajevo became a city of avid runners. Walking and driving slowly increased your chances of catching a bullet. If you wanted to live, you went everywhere fast and in an erratic manner. Whenever possible, additional measures were taken to protect the citizens of Sarajevo. For example, Kulovica Street ran north-south through downtown Sarajevo, offering Serbian snipers an open, linear kill zone. To block the Serbian view of the Sarajevans passing by Kulovica Street, the Bosnians emplaced a giant concrete block in front of it. This block eventually became a well-known landmark after someone spray-painted the words Pink Floyd across it. The block was removed during a temporary 1994 ceasefire, but the sniping soon renewed. This time, Kulovica Street was blocked off with an enormous piece of blue cloth that once hung at the Zetra Sports Hall, where the 1984 Winter Olympics were officially closed. This blue shield that once provided a royal backdrop to competing Olympians now hid Sarajevans from Serbian snipers. Sometimes nature helped protect the city of Sarajevo from accurately fired bullets. Whenever it rained, snipers had a difficult time acquiring potential targets. The same could be said during periods of fog and snow. The winter months provided much-needed relief from the snipers because the days were shorter and the nights longer. While the Serbians did have some night vision equipment for their rifles, it was much harder to make a night shot as one stared through the grainy, greenish hue of a night scope. Sarajevans were probably never safer from the sniper threat than at night and in bad weather. Then they could be safe with a slow jog or by simply moving while concealed in the darkness. The airfield problem. From the early stages of the siege, both attacking Serbs and defending Bosnians agreed to let the United Nations, UN, administer Sarajevo International Airport. Control of the airport was a critical issue because it enabled the UN to fly in humanitarian aid like medical supplies and food to the besieged Sarajevans. For sure, Sarajevans benefited from the UN aid because city officials were able to provide a higher level of care for their trapped citizens. Thousands of more Sarajevans would have undoubtedly perished through starvation, dehydration, and lack of medical care if the airport was not run by the UN. However, the attacking Serbs benefited too. By allowing the UN to run the airport and provide humanitarian aid, the Serbs showed the world they were not fighting a war against the citizens of Sarajevo. The UN control of the airport did help the Sarajevans, but the airport's location caused problems for the Bosnian government because it was located in an exposed suburb several kilometers southwest of downtown Sarajevo. In order for Sarajevans to make it to or from the airport, they had to run a gauntlet of fire from wary Serbian snipers. The UN forces running the airport were themselves in a precarious situation because the airport was the only place on the Sarajevo perimeter not controlled by the Serbs. While the Serbs physically controlled the northern and southern ends of the airport, Bosnian government forces controlled the eastern and western sides of the airport. Consequently, UN forces were caught quite literally in between the warring sides, sandwiched in between two separate groups trying to kill one another. The Serbs agreed to let the UN run the airport, but at a price. The Serbs would only let the UN control the airport if they prevented the Bosnians from crossing from the east over the airfield itself and into the western Bosnian-held side. Consequently, the UN was placed in a position of helping to enforce the Serbian stranglehold on the city while providing aid to the very citizens the Serbs targeted with snipers and artillery. Still, many Sarajevans defied the UN and tried to sprint across the open tarmac to the relative safety of the western side. A lot of people did successfully evade the UN's security guards and dodge the Serbian snipers as they ran for dear life across the asphalt pavement to the west. But crossing the windswept tarmac under the scopes of Serbian shooters was expensive. Hundreds of people are estimated to have been gunned down as they ran frantically in the open, completely exposed to the Serbs. Ironically, the UN forces helped the Serb shooters do their dirty work. Oftentimes, UN security forces exposed groups of Sarajevans with floodlights as they made a mad nighttime dash to freedom. Once the people were lit up under the UN lights, the Serbian shooters had perfect targets. Men, women, and children of all descriptions met their end on the exposed airfield as they tried to make it past the UN guards aiming their bright spotlights and the hidden Serb marksmen aiming their sniper rifles. By the end of 1992, it was clear the UN-controlled airport was a major obstacle to the Bosniak government that had to be overcome. True, pockets of desperate civilians made it across the airfield on occasion, but loads of weapons, ammunition, and fuel certainly could not make it through the gauntlet. Consequently, the Bosnian government made the decision, a decision that was a closely guarded secret, to dig a tunnel underneath the airport to connect the two Bosnian sides separated by the airport. Work started in early 1993 from both sides. It took months of back-breaking work, but after workers toiled night and day in 8-hour shifts, the two sides met together in July of 1993. The physical encirclement of the city was broken. From that point on, weapons and people flowed underneath the airport. Sometimes it took up to 2 hours to travel the 800 meters through the claustrophobic confines of the hastily excavated tunnel. While the journey could be drawn out and exhausting, it was infinitely preferable to running helter-skelter across the runway under the crosshairs of a Serbian sniper. The Serbian shooters could not see through tons of earth, nor could they shoot through the paved runway. For the Sarajevans, the best counter-sniper method at the airport was to go underneath like human moles. The United Nations counter-sniper efforts. The UN first became involved in Yugoslavia's war in September 1991 when the Security Council adopted a resolution calling on all states to enforce a general and complete embargo on all deliveries of weapon and military equipment to Yugoslavia. While this resolution appeared to be a fair and balanced way to limit an increase in the scope of the war, it hurt the Bosnian government more than the Serbs. This was because the Bosnian Serbs were supplied from the arsenal of the former JNA, while the Bosnian government had to smuggle in arms from the international black market. This also meant while Bosnian Serbs targeted Sarajevans with state-of-the-art 50 caliber Black Arrow sniper rifles manufactured by the Zastava Arms Factory, the Bosnian defenders resorted to using World War II-era rifles or sniper rifles captured from the Serbs. From the initial stages of fighting in Sarajevo, the UN had a presence in the city. Their biggest impact, as mentioned, was the impartial management of Sarajevo Airport starting in July 1992. Besides the airport, the UN also had several outposts located throughout the city where they could monitor the fighting and better carry out their mission, which was to make the siege more humane by providing food supplies and medical care to the people, to evacuate people by air, to facilitate Red Cross operations, and to influence the way both sides fought the war. One of the ways the UN attempted to make the war more humane for Sarajevans was to protect them from the Serbian snipers ringing the city. One thing UN forces could do to protect the people was to transport them from one place in the city to another inside the armored hulls of the UN's distinctive, whitewashed armored personnel carriers. Thus, the UN at times became an armored taxi service But traveling in an armored car was no guarantee of safety, as one could get shot as they entered and exited the vehicle. In fact, acting Bosnian Prime Minister Hakija Turajilik was shot in 1993 while riding in the back of a UN armored car as a French patrol escorted him from the airport. The French soldiers made the mistake of opening the rear of the vehicle at the checkpoint and then left it open as they drove off. The UN did more than provide transportation in the city. They also provided a presence in civilian areas. This UN presence was meant to deter Serbian snipers by saying, in effect, "Hey, we're the UN, we can see what is going on, so you better not shoot at the surrounding civilians because we will know who did it." Again, being near a UN checkpoint and patrol did not automatically extend an invisible force field of protection around Sarajevans, as many a person was shot within a stone's throw of UN soldiers on anti-sniper duty. It also did not help the Sarajevans' confidence much when the UN soldiers themselves were targeted by Serbian snipers, as they frequently were. Another counter-sniper measure the UN tried at various times during the siege was the arrangement of anti-sniping agreements between the warring sides. Often, such agreements were not worth the paper they were written on. In Sarajevo, such anti-sniping agreements lasted maybe for a few weeks or only days before a sniper decided, at least for him, the truce was over. During the trial of General Galic, an eyewitness for the prosecution, Mensur Jusic, described in detail one such incident where an anti-sniper truce only led to more carnage. It was September 1993 and an anti-sniper truce was in effect. Sarajevans felt a little more relaxed, walked a little more slowly, and even rode on the city's trams. Then, as one tram trundled along its tracks, a Serbian sniper could not resist such a fat target. A tram packed with unsuspecting civilians. At an intersection, the sniper opened fire, hitting the tram with a bursting bullet, wounding 4 people to include the prosecution's witness, Mensur Jusic, and another witness's 8-year-old son. After the bullet impacted, the people dove to the floor for protection, lying in the blood that was now everywhere until the tram driver accelerated out of the kill zone. The UN's anti-sniper challenges. The UN also established dedicated anti-sniper teams whose job was to enforce the anti-sniper truces. However, these teams did not operate in the classic anti-sniper role and were largely ineffective. During a sniper truce agreed to on August 14, 1994, French peacekeeping soldiers were assigned the job of anti-sniping duties. What this equated to was the peacekeepers would observe the surrounding terrain, and whenever a sniper made a shot, they would record the events, such as the date and time of the shot, from what location the shot came, and which side they thought fired the shot. That was it. The UN anti-sniper teams had no teeth and were incapable of enforcing the truce. The teams only had the authority to arrest confirmed snipers who violated the truce, and they could only use deadly force to defend themselves if they came under fire. Since the UN was the only force in the city considered a higher authority, with the ability to influence the actions of the warring parties by arresting violators of a sniper truce, both sides found it to their advantage to conceal their sniper operations. For this reason, both Bosnian government snipers and Serbian snipers acted like guerrillas when the situation demanded it. It was easy for these guerrilla snipers to conceal themselves when they sniped at off-limit people during the truces, like civilians, journalists, and UN soldiers, due to the disposition of the UN forces in the city. Because the UN forces were positioned at various compounds at the airport and in the city itself, they were located relatively far from the Serbian front lines in their sniper positions. So if a Serbian sniper fired at an unarmed civilian during a sniper truce, what was the UN going to do? A UN anti-sniper team would have to determine the location of the shot and then drive for 10 minutes across open terrain in their white personnel vehicles until they reached the Serbian lines. Once they reached the Serbian lines, the Serbs may or may not agree to let the UN patrol enter their lines, or they may delay the patrol, giving the sniper time to get away. When the UN patrol finally reached the suspected location of the shot, the Serbian sniper was long gone, hiding safely as a regular soldier somewhere else in the Serbian lines. Even if a UN patrol found the person who they thought fired the shot, how were they going to prove it? The patrol would have to first find the weapon fired in the incident and then seize it as evidence. Then the patrol would have to go back to the scene of the shooting, find the bullet fired from that rifle, and then compare that bullet to a sample bullet fired from the captured weapon, all in a forensic lab. If it could be proven the captured rifle fired the bullet that hit an innocent victim, then the UN still had to prove a particular Serbian soldier fired that rifle. And where were the anti-sniper team's fingerprint kits? Where were the gunshot residue kits? Were these anti-sniper teams trained to dust a rifle for fingerprints and to test a person for residue in order to irrefutably link a suspected shooter with a specific weapon? Hardly. The UN was ill-prepared to conduct anything beyond basic battlefield investigations and had little chance to capture a Serbian sniper after the act. In comparison, the UN had a better chance to capture Bosnian snipers who violated the sniper truces because the UN could move freely in the city among the people. The UN did not have to cross a Bosnian trench line to get permission to pass through a Bosnian checkpoint because UN forces lived in the city behind the Bosnian lines and in many ways aided the Bosnians in their defense of the city. Therefore, the Bosnian snipers had to be more skilled at hiding their sniping activities than the Serbs, who were separated by distance and the real barrier of a front line. One day at the end of August 1994, just 2 weeks into a UN-enforced sniper truce, several uniformed Bosnian men were seen in front of a downtown cafe, armed with sniper rifles. Then they got in a beat-up, bullet-ridden Volkswagen Golf, drove off down the street, and snuck into the Parliament building. After firing several shots at the Serbians' own sniper positions in the opposing Jewish cemetery, the snipers hastily departed the Parliament building and returned to the cafe, minus their weapons. French soldiers of the UN force heard the shooting and knew it came from the Parliament building. In response, the French soldiers contacted the Sarajevo police in order to get them to investigate the shooting and arrest the violators of the truce. Of course, the police had no interest in investigating anything that involved their own snipers. By the time the French forces, along with a contingent of Sarajevo police, actually reached and surrounded the Parliament building to search for the snipers, the shooters were long gone. Fortunately for the shooters, the police stalled the UN forces long enough for the Bosnian snipers to escape the scene of the shooting, ditch their weapons, and resume their lounging at the cafe. In this case, even though the UN had better access and freedom of movement in the city, the Sarajevan police used their authority to hinder the UN investigation in order to keep the Bosnian snipers on the streets. Even if the UN forces captured this particular group of shooters, it would not have solved the underlying problem, which was the fact these Bosnian snipers were responding to the Serbian snipers who were also violating the sniper truce by continuing to fire on Sarajevans from their positions in the old Jewish cemetery. If the UN silenced these Serbian sniper positions from the start, the Bosnians would not have felt compelled to respond in kind. At least in the incident described above, the Bosnians were targeting legitimate enemy combatants. It was this lack of real power to react to the sniper threat that ultimately made the UN's anti-sniper efforts ineffective. The Serbians, the originators of the sniper terror campaign, understood only one thing: force. To the Serbs, truces meant nothing, and the UN's weak attempts at arresting their snipers just underlined UN impotence. For example, UN forces once caught a Serbian sniper firing on a Red Cross vehicle and went to the house where the shot was fired from. After knocking on the front door, the patrol talked to the sniper's mother and told her to warn her son not to do it again because next time they would do something about it. One would guess the UN forces thought a really stern scolding would stop the Serbian sniper campaign. This lack of resolute response to the indiscriminate killing of innocent people only emboldened the Serb snipers. The NATO response. After a Dayton Peace Accords of December 1995, NATO became involved in maintaining the peace in Sarajevo and elsewhere as SFOR, Stabilization Force, became of the UN's previous weak responses to Serbian snipers. The Serbians were emboldened to challenge and intimidate the new NATO forces just like they did to the UN forces for the last 3.5 years. In the last week of January 1996 alone, NATO cataloged a sniper attack a day in Sarajevo, including 2 that wounded both an American and a British soldier. On February 1, French forces under NATO command also came under sniper attack, except this time they responded with deadly force and actually killed the sniper. A French patrol subsequently found the bodies of 2 gunmen in a so-called zone of separation between the Serb-controlled suburbs and the Bosnian-held city. NATO officers concluded the 2 men who committed the shooting were Serbian snipers. Apparently, NATO forces thought a tougher approach was needed to stop the Serbian snipers because the authority to arrest or to act merely in self-defense was insufficient. Instead, NATO adopted a shoot-on-sight policy to send the Serbs, who only understood words backed up by the barrel of a gun, a message NATO was not going to be intimidated or publicly humiliated like the UN was. In fact, the French killing of the 2 Serbian snipers was accompanied with a statement by the commander of NATO forces in Bosnia, U.S. Admiral Leighton Smith, who pledged his forces would retaliate swiftly with force against snipers targeting NATO troops. Admiral Smith made the comment, "We've got some jerk up here pulling a trigger and he's got a night scope. That makes it tough, but boy, let me tell you, if we do see him, he'd better be fast and be clad in bulletproof stuff because we will attack without warning." According to a Bosnian Serb television broadcast, NATO Ground Forces Commander Lieutenant General Michael Walker even called up Bosnian Serb paramilitary speaker Momcilo Krajnijic and told him to stop the sniping incidents. In true Serbian fashion, Krajnijic condemned the incidents. What else was he going to do? Admit to the sniping attacks against NATO soldiers? Fallout from the sniper campaign. Spiraling brutality. NATO's tougher stance came 4 years too late for the citizens of Sarajevo, who suffered for 44 months under the longest sniper siege in the history of urban warfare. NATO intervention came only after 1,030 people were wounded, 225 people were killed, and 60 children were murdered by Serbian snipers. Importantly, killing these unarmed men, women, and children by rifle was a conscious act. If one were to fire a mortar round into the city, at least they were not targeting a specific person. A mortar round was too inaccurate to reliably hit an individual. A mortar round was more often than not delivered to whom it may concern. In contrast, the act of killing a person with a sniper rifle is a personal event. The sniper, with their enhanced optics in the form of a telescopic scope, sees exactly who they are killing. It is not a random act. Consequently, when a Serbian sniper blew the brains out of a 7-year-old boy with a precisely placed bullet, they knew what they were doing. Just as another Serbian sniper who shot a young woman in the stomach, blowing out her guts, he too knew exactly what he was doing. It was this specific campaign of mass murder by the Serbian snipers that promoted Goran, the young Bosnian man in Philip Bufer's Sniper documentary, to refer to the Serbians as animals. Goran may not have known it at the time, but he, just like the Serbian snipers who killed innocent people with glee, became polarized. Because the Serbs and their snipers treated the Bosnians and Sarajevans like so many wild boar to be shot at one's leisure, the Bosnians' hearts in response grew hard. After several years of massacre in Sarajevo, Bosnian snipers returned the favor and began to target Serbian civilians. Without doubt, the Serb sniper campaign was instrumental in creating the upward spiral of violence that gripped Sarajevo. With every pull of the trigger, with every woman that fell screaming to the pavement in Sniper's Alley, the Serbs killed more than just people. They killed tolerance. They killed moderation. Maybe that is why the Bosnians began to turn militant. Muslim extremist groups for support. Maybe that is why, during a mutual exchange of bodies in the winter of 1993 in Sarajevo, the Serbs received 26 decapitated bodies, their heads hacked clean off. Maybe that is why, when NATO forces raided a ski chalet 20 miles west of Sarajevo in February 1996, they captured 3 Iranian intelligence officers. The raiding forces also found RPGs, suppressed sniper rifles, pictures of Iran's late Ayatollah Khomeini, and quantities of detonators, blasting caps, and high explosives. Most disturbing of all, the French found bombs built into children's toys, including a red plastic toy car, a helicopter, and an ice cream cone. The Serbs began their siege of Sarajevo and their war against Bosnia under the pretext that Bosnian Muslims were extremists who hated the Serbs because they were Orthodox Christians. The Serb leadership sold a bill of goods to the Serbian people saying Bosnian Muslims always had and always would oppress the Serbs living in Bosnia. These lies spoken from the lips of virulent Serb nationalists like Slobodan Milosevic and Radovan Karadzic, built a foundation of hatred that enabled the Serbs' bloody sniper campaign in Sarajevo. Unfortunately, to some degree, the Serbs twisted Sarajevo's mixed, tolerant society into the very image they lied about to justify the war in the first place.